Okay,
You're now live.
we are now live. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Um, We're back and we are, I think, adjusting to being back together after almost exactly 2 years. And we're learning to adjust to the new technical challenges we have. Most of us have gotten very used to looking at our little postage stamp Zoom meetings, but now we have a big screen. I've just figured out that's a camera in front of me and not an air purifier. Yeah, new technology. So anyway, and Faith, we gotta, there it goes. Okay, we got it. We're live streaming off the thing so we can see everyone. And we're going to start the agenda. And we're starting out with 214, which is the property valuation timeshares. And Lisa Wright is with us from Assessors and Listers Association, VALA. And Lisa, we're really struggling with this one. And anything you can do to help us out. We understand that timeshares seem to be at a time of transition where the monetary value the timeshare once had is gone. People can't sell them or can't sell them at anywhere near what they bought them for. They are, some of them, our testimony's been, are being bought up by organizations that are packaging them as a new form of points, timeshares, shared accessibility. But the buildings are still there, and the buildings are generally very well maintained and in very good shape. But it's not the building that's being sold, it's the right to occupy it. And we had one town that lost $5.2 million in grand list value in 1 year. It's a small town. So we're trying to figure, once they're all bought out, I assume that listers can go to an income valuation if they're being rented or in some way, marketed. But we've got this transition where we've got buildings with mixed ownership and we're trying to help the towns. We've got a couple of proposals here for helping the towns do an appeal. But just anything you can do to help us understand. We've heard essentially from the Smuggler's Notch people, but I assume you probably have a broader view. And what can you help us with?
Okay. If you're ready for me to speak, my opinion on the timeshare appraisal problem is that you should think in a bigger picture. The timeshare problem could be analogous to many other appraisal problems, which is that anything in real estate, the old saw in real estate appraisal is that the only constant is change. So this has changed for the worse with timeshares from the current perspective, which is based on history. With the market changes, it may change the other way. Bottom line, we have not, first I should disclaim that VALA has not taken a position on the timeshare issue per se as an organization. So I always want to clarify when I'm speaking for VALA in a consensus that VALA has on an issue versus my opinion versus a general read on listers and appraisers throughout the state. So VALA has not discussed the timeshare issue specifically. However, we have talked about other appraisal assessment problems in this same context where change is constant. And I think the only consensus that we have is a majority opinion, I would say, rather than a universal agreement, that we would ask the legislature not to tie our hands down the road with legislative action that prescribes valuation. We are the valuation professionals. Empower us to do our jobs and to value properties according to highest and best use and the change that is effective as of April 1st of every year, and to do that fairly and equitably. When a legislative action prescribes valuation, that might be okay in that 1 year and in the context of the time frame that legislation was made. A year later, it might be completely contrary to highest and best use. And it simply ties our hands in doing our job and being fair and equitable to all taxpayers across all classes. Is that helpful in any way?
Okay, yes. Senator Disraki, you have a question.
I do. Appreciate the reference to highest and best use. Could you, in concrete terms, if I have a timeshare condo and its value at the highest best use is keeping it divided into 26 timeshare 2-week periods. Is that what you feel you're obligated to value it at, as opposed to if someone's closed down the timeshare and just sold the condo as is to one home buyer?
Well, again, back to effective date of appraisal. April 1st is our effective date. Let's just take another analogy. Timeshares are an appraisal problem just like anything else, and you have to do the due diligence to go through legally permissible, physically possible, economically feasible, and then maximally productive. So take a piece of land. Say the legislature told us to not value a piece of land based on its potential as a building lot. Well, that might be true 1 year, it might not be true the next year. So that question of whether the highest and best use of those essentially apartment or condominium units is to continued use as timeshares or as condos or back to apartments. And this is apparently happening throughout the country. So again, the only constant is change. There was a question posted on the IAAO listserv, essentially discussing that. An appraiser had put out the problem of timeshares that were being converted. In this case, I think it was back to motels, but it doesn't matter whether they're back to motels or to condos. You've got to look at that as of April 1st of every year, and that is changing.
I guess my question is it the highest and best use as the property is legally configured on April 1st? Because the owner has a choice, and they may make a choice to turn it into timeshares, which then has a lesser value than it would if it was a single condo. But they file all the legal documents and they set it up that way. But so what controls highest best use? Can the owner in some ways dictate what the higher and best use is by legal contracts they enter into?
Well, the legally permissible part, I suppose, is firmly in your court as legislators. I'm not sure, honestly. I have not had a timeshare problem in any of my towns. I do bank appraisals as well as being lister and assessor respectively in 4 different towns here in Rutland County. And I have not had that problem. We don't happen to have any timeshares in any of those towns. So I haven't had that specific problem. But were I to address that problem in one of my towns, I would go through the steps of a highest and best use analysis. And the first would be legal permissibility. And that would include state as well as local municipal restrictions, if any, on doing that. So maybe they'd have a choice, maybe they wouldn't have so much of a choice. Another analogy would be the condos that are, we've said for years that Killington condos are mostly used for owner occupancy with a supplement to income as being rentals. Well, that is changing with the current market. And I may soon find myself saying something different in my reports, that these are being purchased primarily for investment for the rental income on them. So that, in a sense, changes highest and best use. It changes value. And again, I just would ask that you consider the implications of narrowing this down and limiting our options to respond to those market changes as assessors.
So if we say, as the bill asks, that it's valued as straight line building, not the ownership setup, as these turn over and become being bought and used as income producing properties, we may actually hurt the town. 5 years from now, they may well see more taxes or higher value as an income producing property, but right now they're in transition. So if we do something 5 years from now, we may be telling you, you have to value something of which you don't believe is the highest and best use.
Absolutely, absolutely so. And I think you should also think about other industries that may, as I've pointed out these analogies, you can bet a lawyer on a tax appeal is going to find analogies to other industries. I'll give you an example, the miscellaneous energy bill and the part of that made legislative direction as to how to value land encumbered with a solar lease. I am adamantly opposed to that. It is in direct conflict with highest and best use. And I was applying the principles of highest and best use to value that land differently prior to that new legislation. And now we're going to lose some money for our towns because that legislation is passed. So it's going to become effective for this year. We will lose money. We will have some tax appeals as a result of that. And to take it back to other industries, who's to say that the cell tower industry isn't going to say the same thing, that you can't tax us for the value of the lease? That is, again, it's in direct contradiction to highest and best use and appraisal 101, if I may say so bluntly. Again, please don't tie our hands and allow us to do our job. If anything, the help that I believe the towns need from the legislature is more assistance with training and qualifications so that we are more consistently from town to town doing a proper and thorough job and doing fair and equitable assessments. So I understand the pieces that have been added to this bill about increasing the per parcel payment. That's a fantastic first step towards that. That hasn't been increased in years. And I would ask that you add to that some consideration of inactive parcels. And I can explain that further if you would like me to, but it's an important piece of our work that that impacts a lot of other stakeholders in addition to taxpayers and the grand list. So I feel strongly, I've always advocated that my towns need to track those inactive parcels. You know, for instance, if you've got a parcel of 500 acres that is really 5 100-acre parcels. That should be tracked and recorded as such, as 5 separately deeded parcels.
Okay.
And the assessment, the value should be considered, because again, back to legally permissible, physically possible, you have 5 separately deeded parcels. It should be viewed that way.
Okay, I think we're gonna just kind of focus, and we actually have not gone over the newest draft of this bill. So we're gonna do that now. I think we've gotten you're very clear with your message, which is don't mess up tomorrow trying to fix a temporary problem today. I think you're welcome to stay with us, and I think we're going to go, is Abby? Abby is with us.
Camera's off.
There she is, okay. So, Abby, you have, I know you and Senator Hardy have been working on a new version. We sent you out to talk to Lee Remick over at, no, it's not Lee, Jill. Over at the property valuation, and work with her with some of her suggestions. Because the other part of this problem was that if the towns appealed and they lost, they stood to have to come up with a lot of money to pay back the taxpayers that had overpaid. And then we had the other issue that's come up about, and this may well be one of those issues, but difficult to assess properties. The dams, the giant digesters. I know when people first started putting solar panels and windmills on their property, those appraisals were all over the board because they were new. So let's walk through what you came up with, and we'll take a look and see if we can do some good, no harm.
And if people want copies, it's available.
Okay, yes,
You can stay with your computer.
you can, it's on our iPads.
I'm not gonna be
Today.
here in the future.
Yes, this is Faith's one day this week with us. Bill copies are over there for anyone that wants hard copies. And the rest of it,
Says your name
well,
on it, Mark.
Mark, we know likes hard copies. Okay, this is the strike all amendment, right?
Yeah.
No, that's S 53.
That's
This is 214.
It is very different, so,
Sorry.
Strike all, okay.
Cindy, you want to?
Yeah, I do, please.
All right, and maybe it's a side by, section by section, might be the easiest thing to go through.
Okay.
So Abby, walk us through this. I'm looking at the section by section, but
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to use a headset, so I hope that will work well and everyone can hear me okay.
yeah,
Excellent. So I think I'll start with the section by section. It's not called a side by side simply because this is
yeah.
a strike
so
all.
section by
So the
section.
all of the provisions in the bill have been removed. The only real section that was in the bill, as you were just discussing, was changing the valuation of timeshare projects. This language replaces that instead with a report from the Department of Taxes, but I'll walk you through. There are quite a few new provisions that have been added in here. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure I introduced myself. For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. So would you like me to share my screen, or now that you have paper copies? Is that not necessary? Not sure what's the protocol.
I don't know. Committee, would you like Abby to share her screen? Is it,
I don't think it's
No,
necessary.
I don't think it's
It's necessary as
necessary.
long as folks on
Yeah.
Zoom can see it
We've got,
and understand what
It's-
we're talking about.
It's on our website.
It's all online. Yes,
Yeah.
Faith has been wonderful about keeping
it
track
is
of all the
under-
documents. So everything is under my name. And the first I think it would be the easiest to do this section by section. So the very first section does relate to the refund to municipalities. It increases the statewide cap, which is currently set at $100,000. That applies to every municipality that applies for a refund in the state in each year. It increases that amount to $1 million. This is slightly different from what was discussed in committee prior to the break. There was discussion about instead just repealing the cap altogether. The discussions with Senator Hardy led to this other proposal, which is a $1 million cap, still retaining some guardrails about how much the ed fund would be paying back to municipalities. So it is still prorated across the entire state.
May I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
The $1 million number, is that number derived from any estimate based on things that we know about right now that are pending? Is this going to be an amount that is sufficient to deal with all the things that we have pending now based on anybody's opinion or testimony?
I think that the tax department might be the best place to give you those sort of numbers. They did provide over the last 4 years numbers on how much has been paid out, but it was under the $100,000 cap. So this, would be different requests, different incentives under this proposal. I'm not able to speak
presumably there is certain litigation that is pending right now that should give us an indication on a worst case basis that if we lose it in the next tax year, what the effect would be.
But, do you want me to talk now about our
Well,
conversations, or should we have to go
I
for
think
it?
we'll get the tax department.
Yeah, that would
in,
be good,
Yeah.
because we did talk about this.
We
did.
But we should have their testimony.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so.
Yes,
that-
and
we just
I-
want to make sure that that's an adequate number.
Yes, my understanding actually just shared that tax department did just share moments ago that for the hydro dam case in Sheldon, that the Supreme Court case did not go in their favor, but I have not had a chance to look at that. So I can't give you the numbers. I think that was as recent as last week. So that would give you a preliminary indication of at least one town's request for a refund if they were to go that route.
And that alone
Moving,
was somewhere in the $500,000 range, wasn't it?
I have not looked at the case. I would have to look at that decision.
We'll ask the tax department. Give us an estimate. And then how is this a revolving, is this $1 million we put in every year, or is this limited to $1 million from the ed fund? Because this is coming from the ed fund a year, and we know we've got a surplus now, but that's a rarity. And maybe we want to use some of that surplus as seed money in this thing to give us some protection for years when we don't have a surplus and budgets are being pushed up. Okay.
Section 2 of the proposed amendment creates a new state appraisal and litigation assistance program. This is part of what the committee had directed myself and Senator Hardy to go work with the tax department to come up with a new program, a new way of addressing sort of the more systemic issues of assistance for towns with appraising high value, complex and commercial properties, as well as providing professional litigation assistance. So the new program that would be created under Section 5413 and Title 32 would allow the commissioner to contract with professional commercial appraisers to provide assistance to municipalities. The commissioner would have rulemaking authority and programmatic authority to develop conditions for eligibility, including application processes. Also, the language does make it clear that if a municipality is availing itself of the state assistance program, the municipality would qualify as having followed the best practices that are required to get a refund with the $1 million or $100,000 cap under current statute. This would not take effect. This new program would not take effect immediately. It would take effect in 2023. And I'll talk about that a bit more because there is a particular effective date provision that's in this draft. Actually, maybe it would make sense to talk about that now. So because it would be a program that would need to be stood up, implemented, and then maintained, and it would be part of the ongoing operating budget of the department, there is language in here that's slightly unusual. It's not typical to create a program and make its effective date contingent, but this language does make the existence of this program contingent on future funding appropriated for the department. So that's in the effective dates. It says that the program takes effect. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I was sitting making notes and then saying, this bill is going to approach between this and the change in the per parcel fee. So I'm just doing this week's time frame and saying we need to get it out so it can get to approach before they get just, you know, buried in bills, so. Yeah, okay.
In terms of the new program that's being created, because it wouldn't take effect and it does have the contingent effective date, it itself does not carry an appropriation in this bill, but it does require the General Assembly to take action to fund the program in order for it to become effective. The next two sections address the per parcel fees, and those would require a change to the appropriation. These fees are paid for two slightly different purposes, somewhat overlapping purposes, paid from the general fund. Actually, both are paid from the general fund currently. The first is an $8.50 per parcel reappraisal assistance fee. That fee is repealed under this draft. And then the $1 equalization fee is increased to $12. So it combines the two fees and expands the purposes for the equalization fee. It makes it include the existing reappraisal uses for the $8.50 fee. So it's a slight increase overall that would be going to all towns.
Okay. And that's just looking at the inflationary cost. We're not putting any greater.
Yeah, it's actually under the inflationary cost, and Jill can talk about this. This was a sort of.
I'm sure the town force would like this increase.
Yeah.
We've got to justify it to approach. So, okay. But this is just basically, we're combining two fees, saying you're gonna keep doing all the same thing, and we're giving you what, a $3 or $2.50 increase. Okay.
Right. The next two sections, sections 5 and 6, are requirements for reporting and cost estimates from the Commissioner of Taxes. The first, again, relates to the State Appraisal and Litigation Assistance Program. So it requires the Commissioner of Taxes to submit a cost estimate for standing up the program, and then what they expect the continuing operational costs would be. That was included as a means of providing information to the legislature so that if it decided to appropriate funding for the program, it would already have those costs in hand. So that's all due next session. So those are sort of a package for the new appraisal and assistance, litigation assistance program. The report that's required in section 6 relates to timeshare projects. That also requires a report from the Commissioner of Taxes at the start of next session regarding other states' timeshare project valuation laws and how those could potentially apply in Vermont. And that requires also any proposed legislation. Section 7 changes the effective dates. So it makes the fees and then the two reports effective on passage. It changes the cap for refunds to municipalities effective January 1st of next year. So for example, in the Sheldon Hydro Dam case, if they were to request a refund for the case that was lost, they would need to do it by January 15th of next year. And then they would be eligible under that $1 million cap. And then the final subsection under the effective dates does insert this contingent language that requires the legislature to appropriate funds for the new state appraisal and litigation assistance program. And finally, this is yet another bill where the title will be changed, but it would be changed upon passage from the Senate. And that's that entire amendment. I don't know if you have questions or if you'd like to move on to the next bill.
Okay. And any questions at this point? Senator Pearson.
Thanks. Abby, maybe I'm just not understanding, but there's currently this real reticence for towns to contest the evaluation and because of this timeline stuff. So can you just help me understand which sections of this remedy that, or did we address it in this draft?
I'm not sure it's as much the if it's anecdotal, but what I've understood is it's more the amount, less than the timeline. The timeline is that when there's a final appeal, settlement, or court order in 1 year, the town then has to request by January 15th of the following calendar year for that refund. So then the amount that they're eligible for is applied to their next year's education fund payments to the state. So there are a couple of different approaches. And again, this language is broader than what was discussed. It takes a bigger picture approach. Some of these issues were discussed in committee 2 weeks ago, the week before town meeting break. So it does increase payments to towns. Under this language, it does increase it by about $2 or $3, and those are the per parcel fees. So that would provide more reappraisal funding for one. It would create this new state program to assist towns, but again, that's contingent upon the General Assembly actually appropriating that money. And then lastly, the cap is increased, and that's more where the incentive is. My understanding is the incentive would be for towns to actually defend, not saying that they aren't, but it would remove that disincentive of extra litigation costs, extra time involved in defending their valuations.
Thanks.
Okay,
You're welcome.
Senator Brock and then Senator Hart.
And maybe that Senator Hardy is ready to discuss this issue, but one of the things I know that we discussed previously was whether or not litigation cost is something that could be considered in seeking refunds, or if there's another way to deal with litigation costs, again, in order not to disincentivize towns from litigating cases that ought to be litigated. Was there any consideration of that in what's picked here, particularly with this $1 million number?
Are you asking me?
I was asking
Okay.
Abby, but I mean, I'm happy to have you answer too.
Yeah, Abby, do you remember if that came up in our conversations with PBR, that litigation cost?
So the new program does not explicitly provide funding for litigation costs, but it is a litigation assistance program. So that's sort of an open question. It's not explicit in this language. You are correct that the $1 million cap and that refund section under current law and under this proposal does not provide any litigation funds to help towns.
And again, it was, the part of our objective, I believe in doing this, is to not disincentivize municipalities from fighting issues that they should. But I know certainly in one case that I'm familiar with, litigation costs was really quite high to municipality. And if they lose, not only do they potentially lose all of the ability to recover any funds that the state has already received, but they also have an inability to recover litigation costs, which can be substantial. So I think that's something I would like to see us address.
And we probably need to see if Jill Remick could join us. Can you send her an email?
Yeah, there's a question that Lisa writes, so she can answer. I'm sorry, I haven't
Oh,
tracked
well,
it.
Lisa Wright can answer it?
I don't know.
Well, let's see. Lisa, can you help us through this one? We're looking at litigation costs and
Hi, yeah, well, I can answer that one based on two parts of this that I've been involved with. For one, I was a part of the utility committee talking about some of these issues with the PVR proposal submitted to the state, which we discussed with Jill and Christy and Terry in some depth on that. And also I've been involved in the town of West Rutland. We had a very weighty tax appeal going on with Velco, which we have just settled. And I'm the assessor in Proctor, and we have ongoing a tax appeal with the hydro dam in Proctor against Green Mountain Power. So what I can tell you is that from the town's perspective, there are three tremendous costs that I think are addressed somewhat in these. So the first is the cost to properly do an appraisal of a complex property. In the case of West Rutland and Proctor, we hired George Sansucci's firm, and he does a tremendously competent job. But that comes at a much higher cost than your typical residential appraisal. And you'd have the same situation for even a high-end residential. I've been called in myself to consult with towns and do appraisals to defend tax appeals for that. So you've got the cost of a qualified appraiser to do the appraisal in the first place, or to defend it if you get to a court case. Then you've got the legal costs. And then finally, you have the back taxes, the credit in taxes that the town is on the hook to pay back to the ed fund. So it's tremendous. And this, this reimbursement under 5412 only covers the tax credits. It doesn't reimburse us for legal costs. So I would like to hear more about that. I think the per parcel payment assists with the upfront costs of helping towns, again, to do the work at a higher level of competency from the get-go, from the very start. You're always in a better place to defend a tax appeal if you've done your homework, starting from square one. Does that help?
Senator Harvey.
Yeah, so the point of the program, and I think Lisa touched on this a little bit, and Abby as well, of this program that we're asking tax to create is exactly that, to help them appraise really complicated properties, which by the way could include timeshares, and also to provide litigation assistance to towns that are trying to defend an appraisal, especially if they've done the appraisal through this program. And the commissioner would be able to hire consultants or specialized appraisers to appraise really hard to appraise properties. And then if the property owner appeals, then the state would help them with the appeal, the litigation appeal. So that would sort of prevent the problem that towns are finding right now with dams or timeshares or whatever, weird properties or difficult properties. And so this is more taking a bigger picture, longer term view than the ones that are in the hopper right now. And the $1 million, I don't remember if we had the conversation about litigation costs, but the $1 million would cover all the sort of known settlements that are out there that PBR knew about. So they felt like that was, a reasonable number. Yeah.
Will
And
testify.
yeah,
of
and
course.
Jill will be able to talk to that,
Yeah.
but that's
But
my
I would just like to
recollection.
make sure that we are able
Yeah,
to deal with the present situations. I think that what's being done looking forward to the future is great. I think it's
Yeah.
a great advance, but I don't want to forget people who are in the hopper right now who
Right.
have real problems that they have to
yeah.
solve.
And to the point of the amount, Senator McDonald and I were just exchanging notes about this, but yeah, but Jill can speak to this much more directly. But if towns win their appraisal, then it's actually a benefit to the ed fund. So because they would get more property taxes into the ed fund, so it's worth that repayment. It ends up, the ed fund actually benefits, is my point, and Jill can explain it better, but go ahead. I think that's an important consideration. It's not actually using surplus of the ed fund, because the ed fund is going to get the extra amount of revenue anyway. And then the per parcel fees just came up in our conversation because towns are having a difficult time keeping up. The fees haven't been, one of them hasn't been increased since 1997, I think, Abby. Lisa's nodding. And then the other one was increased, but not very much, in 2008 or something like that. And so this was a sort of, Jill gave me the inflationary increase. So this doesn't go as far as the inflationary increase, but it gets us further. There was also some confusion in the statutes. One of them said it was paid out of the ed fund, and one said it was paid out of the general fund. They're both actually paid out of the general fund, not the ed fund. So we clarified that. The repeal, yeah, the fee. So the repeal clarifies that. And finally, I can't remember what the other thing I was going to say, but this was just an attempt to come up with a sort of package that would help the situation in the short and the longer term. But not knowing, the commissioner wanted, or the tax department wanted time to be able to stand up the program and figure out the details before it went into effect. And that's why we have the delayed effective dates in the bill as well.
We're gonna keep going. And we're looking at the schedule here. We've got waiting and corporate tax coming up after this. And there is a chairs meeting at 4 o'clock.
No, it's been canceled, I believe.
It's been canceled.
I got it listed, and you said you do too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I haven't checked my email in the last hour, so, all right, then we're gonna just keep going. And then
Just
I'll
like
get
previous.
just pull people back if they can,
Okay.
because we've got to get these things out of here. Senator McDonald, I think I understand you know, but why don't you share it with everybody?
When the towns have to deal with a appraisal issue that they're not familiar with, they have to go out and hire someone.
Right.
And when they go out to hire somebody, what they're worried about is their municipal tax. Because the tax on the rest of the property, on the education tax is start this again. I understand this and I'm having trouble explaining.
Okay,
When you go out to have a fight for the full value of this dam or
Yes.
whatever it is, if you win and you're a town, you don't lose your municipal tax. Because the municipal tax is yours, you collect it, and you pay the town services of that.
right,
The state, the tax that is collected to go to the education fund, it doesn't matter to you whether you win or lose. Because you pay the same amount per dollar figure, whether you have a large tax base or a low tax base. You don't have any skin in that game because you have a statewide property tax. When the owner of the dam goes into court, if they win, they save on their municipal tax and they save on the state's property tax. And if you're in a town, I'll just say that is an 80% of the property tax goes for education and 20% goes for municipal tax. The dam owner has 4 times the incentive to win, and they will hire and spend money because when they win year after year after year. And the town has little incentive to win, about 1/4 the incentive, because if they lose, they only lose their municipal tax, and the state loses the biggest amount, which is the statewide property tax. So if you don't take that into account, you're not grasping the enormity of the problem, and the state's property tax base is being eroded because the towns, it's not in their interest to go out and hire the best lawyer they can get, because if they lose, they haven't lost that much, and they're only gonna be elected for a couple of years, and
Well,
once
they
it's lost,
gotta pay,
it's
they gotta
lost.
pay the lawyer.
Yeah.
So
So
they're-
they don't pay hire the most expensive lawyer, because they have to justify that for
they're taxpayers.
the winning, not the pile of money on the table, but only a quarter of the pile of money on the table.
Okay, but that also is an argument for why the state has a role in defending
Be-
these
Because the
appraisals.
state is
because
the big loser when the
is-
town is not as aggressive as
Right,
it.
and
Yeah.
2/3, 1/3, I think is pretty standard
Yeah.
for.
Barry would be 50-50.
Barry, actually, municipal has traditionally been more than the school.
Yeah, so in that case, they have more of an incentive to fight.
I think you might find one.
Down the road, it would be, why should we spend our money to?
Yeah, okay, so we got some justification for,
And then the other thing I was gonna add about the appraisal, the payment, increasing the payment, I don't know if you all heard this, but I heard a lot of towns are in a position where they have to do a townwide reappraisal now because of the front. And they don't have, it's expensive to do.
yes.
So this fee would also help that you give them a little bit more money that they can bank to
Okay,
the next
yeah.
time they have to do a townwide reappraisal.
Okay. All right. Committee. We have joint fiscal, I'm told, and this is unlike Zoom because I'm not seeing.
I can show you who's there.
Can you show us who's there?
When they close their screens, they go.
They recommended that we not show you all.
Because they're got pitchforks.
And
All right,
Graham is missing now.
Graham, or I saw Patrick Titterton's picture or face pop up at one point.
Oh, yeah, Graham was gonna do a fiscal note. for
Yeah,
this bill.
So we'll get this.
I don't know where he went. I think he's gotta be in another committee.
Well, maybe we can go on. We don't have a lot of time. We can do our best effort on this. It's going to approach.
You'd like to hear from tax, Joe Remick once more, and I can get Graham later.
What did I want to see?
Joe Remick was the question, was $1 was the amount.
Oh, that was the tax
Oh,
department.
that was the tax part, and then
But
Jill was the litigation.
Senator Hardy's testimony was that tax, when they set the $1 million, that it looked at what was out there now and said it would cover it.
Yeah, that was my understanding from Jill, which they were comfortable with having a higher number, but still having some kind of guardrail so that it wasn't a blank check.
Yeah.
But my recollection, and Abby, if I'm saying anything wrong, please let me know, but my recollection was that the $1 million would cover, including the Sheldon situation. Now, there may be towns that aren't bothering to try to get the money so that it might increase demand because they have more
Yeah.
possibility of being refunded. So we might have to look at it again in a couple of years, but for
The
now,
cost will probably be more in the assistance.
yeah.
If they can do a better job up front, then there will probably be fewer appeals and fewer issues.
The question would be, in the language that we're proposing regarding the $1 million, should there be something added to deal with recovery and associated expenses, and where's that?
I guess I would want to defer to tax on that because I don't know how much that would be and whether that would sort
I
of
think
get
it's
us
something that
into a
perhaps then we
hole.
can ask them when they come
Yeah.
in.
We do need to see if Jill can come in.
You want Jill and tax department?
Isn't she part of the tax department? I
She's
don't know.
PBR, is that tax?
Yeah.
She's in the tax
Yeah,
department, but
okay.
whether or not she.
I'll get you.
Okay.
Whether or not she, not today, but
No.
Graham is coming yet.
Or Rebecca
okay.
Samaroff also has worked, she's worked on this with Jill and Abby, so if Rebecca could come too.
Rebecca can come
I'll do
in.
it another day.
Yeah, all right.
And Graham just returned.
Graham just popped up. So Graham, are you there? Your name is there. There you are. We understand you have a fiscal note on this. At least one we can
Welcome
start
home.
with as a base.
For the record, Graham Campbell from the Joint Fiscal Office. I did not send the committee a new fiscal note because I was communicating with Abby and I wasn't sure where exactly the committee landed on
Okay.
issues.
Which
As
is,
far, the only outstanding issues that I was aware of were the mutual fund fees and the military retirement. Although I got the sense from the last time we
Okay.
discussed the military or the mutual fund fees were not going to be a part of the bill.
Right,
He's talking 53, does he?
yeah, you're
Or-
talking
we're on
53, we're on
242.
property valuation.
Oh,
Time
I'm
shares,
sorry.
we're behind time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we're supposed to be there, we just aren't.
Okay, so on S214, I've begun to look into this a little bit. I still have some information I need to get from the tax department, but the primary fiscal impact that I see in this bill is the change of the per parcel reimbursement going to $12. And so my preliminary look at this is that will increase that appropriation from the general fund by about $845,000. It's about $3.4-ish million for fiscal year 23, and striking the $1 equalization and the $12, making it sort of the $850 for reappraisal, making it $12 for every parcel. There's sort of a flat 12 would make the cost about $4.05 million. So the difference there is $845,000. That's money that would need to be appropriated in the budget out of the general fund. And the only other fiscal impact that I'm still trying to get to the bottom of is the impact of the changing of the cap from 100,000 to $1 million. On the one hand, in theory, if this is coming out of the ed fund, then that might reduce revenues to the education fund, but to the extent that it encourages towns to sort of contest appeals more, it might actually raise money for the ed fund. So I need to speak to the tax department to get a better sense of what they think the overall impact will be.
Okay. Questions for Greg? Pretty straightforward, unless it's hard to know, because any one year that number is going to change, whether or not $1 million's a good place. But we don't reappraise dams every year, so that expense isn't going to be there next year, hopefully.
Yeah, Rebecca sent me a detailed email that I'm just sort of
Okay, well,
digesting,
maybe
so
we
she
can
should, she
see
might
if
be
we
able to
can
come in.
get Rebecca,
You like Rebecca or Jill? Or both?
Either one, they're both on this email.
and can we take a 5-minute break while we get them in?
I don't have any idea if I can get them in right now. You're behind. Jim
We
Demanis
are way
is-
behind it.
So you just need to give me a little better direction. Rich, do you want to go to 53? Or,
The chairs meeting, if it's on, we're not going. Yeah, let's go to 53.
One question, Madam Chair, on 53. I know we're going to be talking about military retirement, which is something that I'm interested in participating in discussion on, but I've got to be in approach at 2:45.
Okay, then.
Or I
we'll
can go to
on
approach while you talk
to
about
Wade.
military retirement.
Either Senator Hardy or myself have to go.
Yeah, one of us has to go at 2:45 to approach, so if we're doing waiting, I'll stay here. If we're doing military retirement, Randy will stay here.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well,
Either way.
we have Abby, so why don't we continue with 53?
Okay.
All right. And we'll see if we can get, if they're sending out, did they just send you that email?
They sent it this morning. What, this was, you mean approach? Oh,
No.
Jill and Rebecca. They
Jill.
sent that in late morning. And I was just skimming through it and they addressed some things that we talked about in other
Did we all
additional things.
get it?
No, they did, so they sent it to me at just before 1. And then to
Alright,
me
so
and
they
Abby.
should send that. Yeah, we need them to come over.
Yeah, I think they should come in and
Alright.
rather than.
Do you have any response?
Not yet.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Because I would like to get this wrapped up if we can today. We've got to start getting these things close to.
Yeah.
We're either gonna do this or we aren't, and Apropes is gonna go over the numbers again with a fine tooth comb.
Jim Demaris,
Yeah,
he's just joining.
there is a
Tell
new
Jim we're
draft.
way
to the
behind. How
public
late can he
So
stay?
he can stay till 4. He says to be somewhere else at 4.
Ah,
And Abby has to be somewhere else at 4.
You'd like to do something. So
Okay, well, let's,
you're not supposed to hear that under the mask.
all right. So we will put off committee discussion and we will go on to S53
Now.
now, and we will stay on. We've got Abby.
And Jim can wait. So if.
And see if Jim can wait.
I'll go across the hall.
Now, this one. Yeah. We had agreed, right, on what we were going to put in to the corporate tax bill. And is that all drafted? Abby? All right. The one thing that came in, well, there were two. One was raising the fees, the securities fees, but that was done purely as a fundraiser. And since we're not doing everything the House did, I don't remember any testimony from DFR saying they had a reason to justify raising those fees. It was purely, we need the money. So I wasn't gonna take that up. We have military pensions proposal. We have another bill which is civil service, federal civil service employees who had their social security at least up, I'm not sure if it was the 80s or 90s. And the military also didn't pay social security until the 80s or 90s. But you have retired people now who at some point didn't pay social security. And so they don't quite fit into our basic social security exemption, which is capped, and it's capped at an income level, which works with our progressive tax structure. And Senator Pearson, I know you were working with Graham to see if we could, it's a lot more complicated and expensive, or it seemed to be, to do the civil service employees. So, yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to you and Graham, and what'd you work out or did you?
So I'll be quick and turn it over to Graham probably, Graham. But recall that a big part of their pension was, their exemption from Social Security, and then they got in lieu a civil pension, was sort of a combo of a pension plus Social Security equivalency. So we were trying to make it equal, not greater than. So basically the best that we could think of was to come up with some dollar equivalency that we would forego for people that had this kind of civil servant pension. And so I think I'll turn it over to Graham now, but he also pointed out that there are others in the same category. If you were a teacher from Massachusetts, you might fall into this. And so we kind of have two ideas here, the same principle just to civil servants, and then the principle applied to anybody who falls under this category. It's not a huge amount of money, and it's a diminishing amount of money, but Graham, have I teed it up more or less accurately, and can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, for the record, Graham Campbell, I don't know if I can do a whole lot better than what Senator Pearson said. More or less what I think the construct that Senator Pearson has requested to be drafted is to create an exemption for civil service retirement employees, civil service retirees rather, such that the total tax benefit, so the benefit they'll get on Vermont taxes, is equal to that of what we estimate is the tax benefit to Vermonters for the Vermont Social Security exemption. So this year, we estimate that the Vermont Social Security tax exemption, just the Vermont portion, the Vermont specific one, is around $225 a year. And so in effect, what I helped Senator Pearson do is come up with an exemption that would generate a tax impact of roughly that. And so I'm struggling. I can't quite remember exactly what the number is, but the total cost of the exemption is $385,000. I think it was a $10,000 exemption for civil service retirees. So if you were in this system, you would get to deduct from your income $10,000 flat. And we estimate that would benefit these people roughly about $235 a year, which is roughly equivalent to that for the Social Security exemption.
Okay, and that would have the same income caps as the Social Security? Because if you're making $200,000 a year in retirement, you don't get to do the Social Security deduction, right?
That's correct. So it's my understanding that the $10,000 that would be deducted for civil service retirees would only be eligible for those who had incomes at the same, the threshold would be the same as the Vermont Social Security exemption. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I keep thinking of the part-time postmistress, which I never realized was a federal civil service, but there was a time when we had a lot of those in Vermont, and they are probably all retired at this point, but it would be helpful to help them. Okay.
And I just want to ask Abby, I'm pretty sure you have language, maybe there was some gaps of what number we would land on, but am I right that if you have that, right?
That's correct.
So Madam Chair, we're not wed to this, but creating the equivalency precisely is difficult. So I think this was sort of our best shot at something that wasn't too onerous, but would do, come pretty close and treat all these folks and dare I say, hopefully put the issue in the rear view here and create the equality. I mean, I am glad to try to do that. I think it's important. I maybe I'm the only one, but I hope we won't come back next year to learn of the new, the class of folks that we didn't hit. So that was our attempt, or one of the ideas that Graham's talked us through.
Yeah, 300. What was your bottom figure, Graham?
Yeah, so for a $10,000 exemption for civil service retirement system retirees would be $385,000. If the bill's language was expanded to include other pensions that don't receive Social Security, so we're talking about Massachusetts teachers, California teachers, and a couple other state employee systems, the number would be higher, but I have not had the opportunity to look deeper into it. I don't think it would be significantly higher than $385,000, but it would add an additional cost. I just have to somehow find research on how many of those people live in Vermont. So for the flat exemption of $10,000 for the civil service retirement employees, it would be $385,000.
So you add $10,000 to the point at which the Vermont tax system kicks in.
It gives you roughly the equivalent of the Social Security deduction you can make up to, is it 55,000 or 50,000 an individual and 65 a couple? And then they kind of ramp down over the next 5,000.
The Social Security exemption is, yes, it's very close. So it's 45. So it's a full exemption under $45,000 for a single filer, and then that phases out over the next $10,000. And then for a married couple, it's full exemption under $60,000 in adjusted gross income, and that phases out over the next 10,000.
And there is a bill coming, or we may have it, that raises that slightly. I think joined Senator Pearson that I would love to be able to put this behind us and move forward. I also like that there's equity. I mean, we did this because the bulk of Americans pay Social Security. I'm trying to see if there's a way where we could just say everybody under X income threshold gets to deduct a certain amount once. So if you have a civil service and a Social Security, you can deduct one, but not two. And I think a lot of military are in that, that group where after retire, well, they are paid, now both are paid Social Security. So this is almost as we phase out of the folks that didn't and come in.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Graham, or Senator Pearson, I'm not sure. I guess I'm still not understanding why it's not just the same as Social Security, where you can just have an income level and say that up to this income level it's exempt, like we do with Social Security. Why is it more complicated for this? What am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing a lot.
So, Senator Pearson, do you want to?
Well, the snapshot is that it's not a one-to-one parallel. You forego your Social Security and you get a much more generous, you get a pension plus something. So you can't just forgive all of that, because then you've gone the other way. You've moved way past equity into a pretty generous tax benefit, right? So let's say if you're a Social Security recipient, you're getting about $12,000 a year. If you're a retired civil servant, you're getting, probably $28,000 a year. I'm just making that number up. But when you negotiated that, it was the idea was you're not paying Social Security, and I'm sure, by the way, that was a negotiation that created Social Security. But you were getting this pension was more generous than just a pension, because it acknowledged that you were not getting Social Security. So it was those two benefits kind of combined. So we can't just look at that. That would be going far beyond the benefit that somebody gets if they're just earning Social Security.
Okay.
Okay, and Graham, I think it gets down to adjusted gross, and first $30,000 of Social Security is not taxed federally, and therefore comes off of our adjusted gross income where we start. So we start looking at your income already minus the first 30,000. And that's why it got more expensive.
Got it, okay.
That's correct. Yeah, I think what we were thinking about here was if we were thinking about creating equity between the two groups of people, the equity portion came on what we wanted to give the Vermont, we wanted equity to be on the Vermont tax side. So federally on Social Security, as you said, Madam Chair, a good chunk of it is already exempt already. And so the Vermont tax benefit of the Social Security exemption is really only the portion from most taxpayers from about 30,000 to about 45,000 for a single filer, and 35,000 up to 60,000 for a married couple. And so that's where the average tax benefit of about $200 comes from. So that's the average Vermont tax benefit for Social Security recipients for that exemption. And then so the goal is to sort of make that roughly equal for the civil service retirees. And as Senator Pearson said, if you were to exempt the entirety of it, you would be sort of going beyond what Vermont is offering for Social Security beneficiaries.
So committee, does that work? Can we do? This is the easy one.
This is the easy one in terms of the military being the harder one.
The military is
Why
more expensive, yes.
So why are we treating everyone parity and equity?
I'm trying to, I can't hear you.
I'll get to it. Is the military proposal that's floating around now the same as the one for civil servants?
No,
No,
Is it more generous?
yes.
much.
Why?
Several
Good
reasons.
question.
I'd say there's several reasons, but I don't know if you want to argue that now. but
Well,
I can give you the reasons.
I intend to argue that next. I would like to say we are achieving in this one as close to equity between your standard American taxpayer who gets Social Security. And the majority of Vermonters don't get a pension. And the civil servants who don't get Social Security, but get a more generous pension and get treated differently. So we've got equity there. The military proposal that, and it did not come, this bill as it came to us exempted, was it the first 10,000?
Yeah.
Which,
Of military
of
retirement.
military retirement, which is equivalent to Social Security, pretty much.
So a military pension, I'm trying to phone the numbers. I guess what I would say is that a $10,000, we estimate a $10,000 military retirement pension will give a tax benefit of roughly $230 to military retirees. So it's actually very close in terms of
Very close, okay.
average tax benefit from Vermont
Okay.
as the civil service. If you go with the $10,000 military retirement.
But some military also pay Social Security, right?
They also receive Social Security. So for those military retirees that are collecting Social Security and they have incomes below the Vermont threshold, they would be getting, a $10,000 exemption for Social Security plus an exemption for their Social Security as well.
Okay, so that would definitely give them a double preference. All right, the proposal, I'm not even sure it's a bill from the governor, is because military people retire early, some of them, they are eligible to retire early.
Virtually all of them are.
All of them, but they don't have to retire at 40.
No, you won't have a person at age 65, which is a Social Security age, qualify immediately for military retirement. The military retirement average goes in somewhere typically in the early to mid 40s when a person becomes eligible to receive military retirement income.
Okay, if,
And that
Or they don't get promoted.
Well, it's just the way it is, because after 20 years, that's when you hit it.
okay,
And they-
let me understand, if I go in and I'm private after 20 years, and
you
I.
did a really lousy job.
Yeah, I know, I have a big mouth, I don't know respect, and I.
You
keep
should
getting
be a
frustrated.
sergeant.
I should be a sergeant, but I'm not tough.
Respect.
Or something. But after 20 years, I enlisted at 18, I'm 38 years old. I may have skills, or I may just be a general laborer, but I may have good working years left. I should have. But I'm also paying Social Security, right?
Yes.
Now, okay. So, but if I work, I stay in the military until I'm 65.
It's virtually impossible to do that.
You get weeded out by not being promoted.
Yeah.
And if you're
There
in
seem
the
to be a
office,
lot of 65-year-old generals.
well, but
Not that many, actually.
Well, no, there aren't that many generals, but,
Well, there aren't that many generals who reach that age at all.
so why wouldn't I stay in until I was 65? Because I
you
don't get,
passed
so
over.
I get passed over, my pension is dependent on my rank, not on my years,
They're both,
Both.
on both.
on both.
But you can't stay on if you don't get promoted. If you're passed over and don't get promoted as an
This is an
officer,
option.
they thank you very much, and you're done.
And generally speaking, that's 30 years.
They fire you. All
It's
right.
generally 30 years, and it may be beforehand if
Okay.
you're not promoted.
So
on schedule.
I'm now 50. I've been paying Social Security for those 30 years. So,
And you presumably would be paying, if you retire in your 40s, you're presumably paying Social Security in your second career
yes.
as well until you reach 60.
Right,
Which is a.
so am I going to get my full pension plus the
Yes.
Social Security deducted?
Correct.
Graham, do you have, I know you have a fiscal note. I've got 634 in my mind, but that's not 1,000, that's families, right?
So we estimate that's a $10,000 military exemption. Or $10,000 exemption will reduce state revenues by about $900,000 a year, with an average tax benefit of about $230 a year for the military retirees. Senator Brock is correct that most military retirees, when they retire, are between the ages of 35 and 50. So it's about 70% of military retirees retire between that age. In Vermont, of our roughly 3,900 retirees, I think it's roughly about 60% are over the age of 65. So while military retirees tend to retire early, in Vermont, the group, 60% of the retirees we have are 65 or older. Now they still could be working at over 65, but those retirees would be eligible to collect Social Security at that point. And so those underneath would not be eligible to collect Social Security, or they would be facing reduced benefits. And so, but in general, Madam Chair, you're right that military retirees who are retired and sort of they're not working anymore, they are also eligible for Social Security.
Okay.
Now, one of the things, though, you would say is that because of our tax policy, our military retirees are older than they are in many other states because they're discouraged from coming here or staying here. And that's some of the testimony, for example, that we heard.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you how I have sat and listened to military retirees tell me they can't live here if they tax their pension. I don't have a pension, neither does my husband, and neither do most Vermonters. And it costs, but I'm trying to find, in my mind, equity. And Graham.
So if I may
Yeah.
respond to Senator Brock, we have the percentage of older retirees in Vermont is disproportionate than other states. Is that So one of the reasons could be, the reason you gave, which was,
Well, for military retirees.
yeah, was do we have more older military retirees? Because younger people don't come
One
here.
of the reasons is that our younger retirees today don't stay in Vermont or are not attracted to come to Vermont. And that again is the second major piece, is this is an economic development initiative in order to get some of the key skill sets that we need that we cannot hire. And we cannot retain, and we cannot attract.
Okay, well,
And Madam Chair.
okay, fine. I need to get one of these settled.
I got it, it's fine.
Will,
The other
yes,
interpretation would be that this is a very attractive place for older retirees to come, and they come here in droves. So the numbers, you can make an argument for both ways. I don't accept that the reason we have more old retirees than other states is because young people don't come, it could be because older people come in greater.
No, we're saying
Okay,
older military
Okay.
retirees.
And we have asked,
I'm
on
gonna,
several occasions, we have asked, can you compare Vermont's retirees to other states based on Vermont's original enlistments? So we can answer this question, and we
Okay.
never get the answer. So Senator Brock's interpretation is
one.
equally as valid as mine, unless
Yes, it
someone
is.
has the numbers to
Well, one of the things. we
determine
did-
which one we
Okay,
should
I'm gonna call a halt to that argument because we have that argument over tax policy and whether rich people move in or move out. And people believe what they believe. It's like TIFs. And I think, and we had it with the discussion on the the corporate tax and going to the single sales thing would, yeah. And people make decisions for very complicated reasons. Frequently, it's where your family is. Frequently, it's where there's a job, or if your parents are older and they need you, or your grandkids live there. And then there's the housing pricing and availability, and
You're
people,
correct, Madam Chair,
you
you're correct.
cannot say that it would definitely be
I would not say why people came here, because those are only
right,
opinions. What I ask is, how many come here compared to going elsewhere, so that we know whether we are getting
Don't know
more
that.
or less than our share, and we do not have to depend upon speculation as to why we get a lot more or get a lot less, because no one has told us whether we get more or
Or
get
less.
less.
But what we have seen, and some of the attachments, some of the information attached to our file right now shows analyses that compare those states that have enacted military retirement benefits, a reduction in taxation, to what their attraction rate is to military retirees over the next X number of years. And we've seen increases in those states, whereas Vermont has remained flat. That's one of the major indicators.
Vermont also does not have a major military base near here.
But that's,
So when you retire, you don't have kids in high school that keep you there, that it's, what I want to know is what is justice? Because we have a system that is set up that says everybody pays according to their ability.
we have a system though that is uncompetitive to the rest of the tax world, when we are in 47 other states.
When we're finished with this.
All right, but I'm trying to get a polling of the committee. Understanding there's apparently a bill out there on retirement income justice, which would exempt all or a good portion of income for everyone over the age of 65. I guess AARP is
Other
pushing
states
that.
can do that, not a lot, but there are some.
There are some out there. This is a small state with a small tax base, and either we give up this money, we are going to have to raise taxes on somebody else, or we're gonna have to spend less on something.
Well, again, though, there's the other argument, and part of
That
it is
they
the
will-
economic development argument, that in
Yes.
other states that have done this, what you've seen is an increase in the tax base ultimately because of the attraction of both military retirees and their spouses and families who add to our taxable income. And there've been a couple of examples, and again, it's in the material that we provided.
Okay,
So you
Senator,
can look at those analyses and judge for yourself.
Senator Pearson.
I would commend Senator Brock. He's vehement in his defense, but we are hearing the same, opinions over and over. So, Madam Chair, you were about to ask us a question, and I'd like to hear it.
I'd like to poll,
I would like to ask the question of Pearson
okay,
on the military side. Because we've heard over and over again that this is a thank you for people who have served in the military. That's a justification for the tax breaks. And for those of us who are veterans, who had 2 years of our lives taken to serve the country before more generous salaries were made for retirees, there is no thank you. And how much would one have to shave off in the way of tax breaks to allow draftees who to serve 2 years with no substantial military income at all, because they hadn't raised the price for a professional army that we have now. We've been going to find a variety of people who have been worked and not received benefits. We're trying to equalize it. We've got a military benefit here for people who served in a professional army in the United States, and zero for people who were drafted and served their country and missed 2 years of income. And I don't see anything in there as long as we are dealing with justice issues. I don't.
okay. And if you have a proposal, get it drafted and bring it to us.
Give them the same $10,000 off their income that you've given other people.
Well, I think technically they're getting Social Security. I'm wondering what happens to the guy that went to Iraq, is in the Guard, comes home wounded and can't work. I'm not sure that the VA benefits, or is there a pension?
You
That
get
you
a
get?
monthly payment for your disability, plus you get, for disabilities up to 50%, you get money off your, a discount on your property taxes, which is computed and then taken off dollar for dollar from your income.
That's Vermont.
That's Vermont. That's what we do in Vermont.
Right, that was the tax break we gave veterans.
Who came home and were disabled and unable to work. That was
Okay,
that's what we did for that group.
okay.
I was trying to answer.
And that was back in the 40s when these.
No, this was,
Well, that was the adjustment, but the original, you got money off your property value.
which served no purpose for
Once we
those
did
people
Act
who
60.
paid their school taxes
Right.
based on income.
Once
So we took
did
the
Act
dollar
60.
value and moved it
Yes.
over and took it off what they
But
owe.
that property tax adjustment was what Vermont did back when the soldiers were coming home from World War II, which is when most of these other tax deductions, it was pretty smart, because you didn't have to pay it for
It
20
was
years.
stepped up where towns could vote town by town by
Yes.
town, in addition to what had been put in place in the late 40s or early 50s. And it was done town by town by town. And
Senator, we are way behind, and
all I've asked to do is, when people ask, what are the benefits, we try and answer the question.
okay, I am trying to get a sense of the committee as
With or
to
without
how
the
much are we
draftees?
going forward with a complete exemption for all military pensions. Are we going to, we can go forward with the 10,000, which basically gives them a double deduction, so we're showing favoritism.
That's what the
there.
House is.
That's what the House has sent us. Or are we going to say you can deduct 10,000 from your pension, 10,000 from your social security, but that you are going to be treated like, basically are giving you a $10,000 deduction, all up to a certain income level. The military pension, I think, goes all the way up. If you retired at 30 and became a consultant with Boeing or somebody, you could have a pretty substantial retirement income. So what committee? Because we've got to, this is Fisher cut bait.
I have a couple of
Okay.
basic questions, I'm sorry. Do the military folks pay into their pension the way social security people pay into their pension?
Do military people, do you pay? Is there a deduction?
No,
No.
it's considered part of salary. You're in it,
Okay.
but there's no payment.
No payment.
So it's unlike
And the
social
average
security.
person on the military pension draws that pension for many more years than a social security recipient does. Who can only qualify at age 62.
I would assume, yes.
That's correct.
And do we have a bill before us asking us to do full?
But the House bill that came over.
The House bill that came over did the $10,000 deduction. It was on the corporate tax bill, which is why we're dealing with it.
And then we have
The proposal, I'm looking for my list of bills, is
Did you
I
put
do
in the bill
not
last
think
year?
that we sent,
And there's a bill this year too.
I don't think we do not have a bill, right?
Yeah, we do have a bill, but we haven't dealt with it. And so what we dealt with solely
I'm
was,
trying to find it.
I don't know if it's on the wall here.
From last year?
Or this year, one this year.
510
Or 227. That's 227.
510, that's child tax credit and social security.
That's a House bill.
That's not, that's
Yeah, but
the new
there's a
one.
Senate bill. I know I introduced one. I don't see it
And
on.
Abby
That's 12.
Was
That's
it?
12, the very first one. It says
Yeah,
eligible.
That's last year's, but you had some here.
but it's still here.
Okay, it is, it's not, oh, there it
It's
is.
the one you're advocating,
Income-
Senator,
No,
right?
I've got S12 as income.
12
that's
is the one you're
212.
advocating.
No,
How
we're talking about 53 right now, so we're
Abby,
talking about what the House
What
did.
bill is it?
We're dealing with 53.
Do we have
There-
a bill?
Sure. Last year, there was a bill introduced, S12,
Okay,
that exempted military retirement pay, phased in over 2 years.
Okay.
And it was one half in the first year, one half in the second year. It did not apply to survivor benefits.
okay, and the governor has proposed survivor benefits be
Yes.
included. Okay, and that is still on the wall. It's not on my list.
And the
here.
House had a similar bill, and what the House did apparently is it just simply took military retirement out of the House bill, which was a similar bill, I believe, to S12, if I remember correctly, and just put the $10,000 in. They apparently debated the larger full amount, and they settled on a $10,000 amount at the House. And that's what came in S53, which, you know, had all the other stuff that came in with it.
And what's the cost of the House passed bill versus the full cost, Graham, per year?
The House, so what passed the House is a $10,000 military retirement exemption. And we estimate that'll reduce revenues by $900,000 a year.
And the governor's proposal?
The governor's proposal, we estimate, including survivor benefits, will reduce revenues by $3.25 million per year.
And we've had a healthy discussion with JFO as to whether or not their analysis is as complete as it ought to be.
Right, but I think,
I support it. to build a house and send us over with the first 10,000. So if you're looking for a straw poll.
Okay. I got one. Is it me? What are we doing?
Nothing.
Technical difficulties. Senator Bray, where are you on this one?
Well, the notion of equity, I think, is what I'm most interested in, is we're gonna end up, as we've said, with petitioner after petitioner after petitioner. And so if we're going to be doing something for one group, it makes me think, okay, then how do we justify that we're not gonna do it for another group? And then if we're gonna be doing it for one group, I also feel like, well, okay, are we doing something roughly equivalent? And so the math that's been going on today, to come up with a roughly equivalent program seems to be the fairest thing I can think of. Underneath it all is something that you brought up, that I've brought up before as well, is that however sympathetic we are and supportive of the groups that petition for relief, the average Vermonter has no pension. And so it's there's some caution that as a result of having, the average Vermonter doesn't have a lobbying group to speak for them other than us. And so I don't want to call them special interest groups, but these other groups come through and end up getting treatment that's not the same as the rest of folks. And so I have the concern of how, if you keep extrapolating, how far do we go before those who are sort of least well off are most disadvantaged when it comes to their retirement years.
Madam Chair, I think that Senator Bray's, we need to know what you're asking us, and I made a mistake voluntarily saying I support what the House came over, and what, if you're gonna ask us, should we do like military pensions, I would say, do what the House sent us, don't go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And then
that,
I assume that you're gonna ask us about Senator Pearson's attempt to make level playing field, and then we'll.
I would like to put
I would
it all
support that,
in
but I don't know the order in
yes.
which you're gonna ask the questions. So
Well, I
can,
didn't get any no's when I asked, so I assume we're doing okay with the civil service. Senator Pearson.
Madam Chair, I'm not as sympathetic as I am to folks who've served for the career military. I really, it's hard for me to stomach this tax write-off when they're coming into retirement, immediately eligible for a pension, and frankly, in the prime earning years of their life. It really, it is, it's not something I comfortably support. But if we are going to do it, as Senator McDonald has said, along the lines that the House did it, I would suggest that we modify that and stop the benefit once they are collecting Social Security, because at that point, I don't see why we would give them a double benefit. We've just given folks a tax write-off for their prime earning years, and then adding to that. So if we're going to advance it, I would suggest a slight modification that it expire once, that they not be eligible for both the Social Security and the military pension benefit.
We could say that everyone, and again, I'm assuming with the income tax caps that we've got, that everyone that falls under those income caps can deduct the first 10,000 of either their pension or their Social Security. So if you're collecting a pension at 35 or 40, you can deduct the first 10,000 of that pension during your productive years. Then when you get to collecting Social Security, you can choose. Would that work? That would give us a generalized, and then I think we've got everybody. I think. I'm sure somebody will find somebody we missed, but
Yeah.
what, if we did the first 10,000 and did what Senator Pearson is saying, is that the equivalent to what we just talked about with this civil servants or not? Graham, is that?
I need to sort of think here for a second, but I'm trying to follow the committee discussion. So to be clear, a $10,000 flat exemption for any type of pension is sort of a much bigger can of worms. If we're just going to say, all right, if you, for military retirees, you either get your $10,000 military exemption, or you get Social Security, and that's sort of a different thing. So I guess I'm sort of not following the full discussion of what's being proposed here. So is it that military retirees, when they are eligible for Social Security, would get the Social Security exemption, but then they would lose their $10,000 military retiree pension? I see Senator Pearson shaking his head. I think that I don't know about the drafting or anything like that, but one thing you might consider is there might be military retirees who are collecting disability payments as well. So this Social Security also includes disability, and you might have retired military who cannot work, who are collecting Social Security disability payments as well. And so I guess I would just have the committee consider that as if that's the intention. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than just thinking about old age retirement.
Yeah,
the
that
Social Security is also disability as well.
But it's 10,000 more than they're getting now, right?
So under the current law,
Taxable?
so under current law, Social Security is exempt for anyone under 40,000 single and 60,000 married. So if you are old age, if you're receiving Social Security because you're retired, or you're receiving Social Security because you're disabled, or if you're receiving Social Security because you're a survivor of someone who's receiving Social Security, that's all exempt under Vermont current law. And so what is being proposed here, or what's being talked about, is a military retirement exemption of $10,000. And so if the committee's thinking about building a structure where it's $10,000 of military retirement pay is exempted up to age 65, or you can, or if it's one or the other, then I think you might have some people who are military retirees who are also receiving disability, but they're not, necessarily old age retirees.
But I was thinking if just 10,000 for everybody, or the equivalent. And if you have pension and you're 45, you can deduct your pension. I think military is one of the few that you can collect your pension that early. Police probably. But once you hit 60, it's an either or. You can't double dip, but the House proposal gave us a double dip for military. And we can go there too and say that's our thank you to the military. We let you take your Social Security up to 10,000, and we let you take your pension up to 10,000. I think those are, one you get one $10,000 deduction, the other one, once you're old enough to do Social Security, and you come under those income caps, which will probably raise by the time today's retirees retire or collect Social Security. We can do that. I've got Senator Brock and then Senator Pearson.
One thing that I would ask that we all bear in mind is that military careers and military retirement are different. They're not the same as someone who works at the post office, or maybe there's someone who works at the post office, but it's not the same as a person who works a regular job. These are people who for 20 years or 30 years may be called upon to go away from home or family for a year or two in the worst places of the world defending our country. They are not the same as people who are, quote, normal retirees. And I wouldn't view them in that same light. The second thing is we are doing something that is theoretically of gratitude and recognition, but we're also doing what virtually every other state in the country is doing without the kinds of restrictions and rings that we are attempting to place on them. The third thing is that we are doing this also for our own benefit as an economic development benefit in order to attract people who can add to our workforce when we have this severe demographic crisis. Those three things in my mind say as a minimum that what the House did with this single $10,000 piece, which is very clear cut, very unambiguous, I think is a positive move in the right direction. It's not everything that I would want to see in a bill like this, but I think it's the right thing to do. And I think it's the sensible thing to do. And I think it's the fair thing to do.
Yeah.
And I would add also the one thing I know that you've raised previously, Madam Chair, is that this opens the door for every other group to come in behind saying that, well, you gave it to them, give it to us too. And again, one of the documents that I believe is on our website in which we examined that, we asked NCSL to help us with that, is that what's happened in other states that have enacted this? And the answer is it's not. And again, you can read the detail in that report along with the appropriate references. Yes, there's some states that that exempt all retirement income or retirement income over under a certain amount for everybody. There's some that do it for first responders and so on, but that is not what's happened over, let's say, the past 10 years, where states have increasingly adopted exemptions from military retirement pay. The first responders and so on have not come along and have not been included in that.
Senator Stewart.
So I think I'm more aligned with Senator McDonald, Bray, and Pearson on this one. I have experience in dealing with pensions. I represented the state troopers and I represented the professional firefighters. Their pensions are very dear to them. And when they're asked to make added contributions to their pensions, it's something that they really fight vigorously. And I'm hearing that the military doesn't make any contributions towards building up that pension account. But one of the arguments that's always thrown against the firefighters and the police and the troopers is that, yeah, well, you can retire at age 45. So you're getting your pension for 15 or 20 more years than the rest of us is in Social Security. So I think that there already is some added advantages to the military. And I, for one, think you will have the state troopers and the firefighters in here as we expand this, and we should treat people equitably, I think, you know. And as far as economic development goes, I mean, you can make the same argument, you probably would. Let's repeal Vermont's income tax. We'll have tons of people coming here, you know. It's a tax policy. I just don't, I think it would be certainly a good step to bring them up to the same as civil servants and Social Security. I'm not so sure about even doubling that amount.
Okay. So right now, it sounds like the argument is, do we do a straight 10,000, either or, Social Security, pension? And you can do a continuum there, but $10,000 is what you can deduct. Or do we say for military, you can deduct the $10,000, and then when you're 65, you can deduct 10,000 of your Social Security income. So that at that point, you, at 65, you do better.
I don't, with all due respect to Graham, I think getting into the distinguishing between disability and retirement is a non-issue, at least it is for Social Security, I know that. You get the same amount of money, whether you're disabled or retired. It's basically a payment back to you for the amount you paid in because you could no longer work or presumed not to be able to work anymore. So I don't think we really need to distinguish whether you're getting a check based upon disability or retirement in the social security front.
Graham, what about survivors benefits? Because that's also,
That's different.
that's what I'm a little more sympathetic to, I think.
So I guess which survivors are we talking? Are we talking survivors of military retirees or survivors within Social Security?
No, we're not playing with Social Security.
Okay, there were.
Survivors benefits are your husband or wife, the colonel, the sergeant dies.
Yeah.
What happens to that military pension?
So it gets, if I think there are rules around who can receive the survivor benefits, but generally it's spouses and minor children, I believe. There are about 752 individuals in Vermont receiving military retirement survivorship benefits, totaling what we estimate a tax. If you exempted them fully, you would be exempting about $280,000 in income tax. The total amount of money going to survivors in Vermont is about just under $8 million a year in military retirement benefits paid.
Okay, and this is survivors. And that's without any income tax cap, right?
That's with no income tax cap. It's a full exemption, yeah.
Okay, so if we put in survivors benefits under the same income cap, because well, no, if you're, yeah, I guess if you were 40, you get survivors benefits if you die in an industrial accident after you retire, or is it only if you are killed in the military?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Military people know? No.
I'll say let's get the actual facts rather than comment on it. And look at these.
What do we decide in terms of Social Security? What do we decide in terms of Social Security, in terms of survivor benefits? Because I mean, I get retirement benefits and I get survivors benefits. So is the lump sum together subject to the cap, or do they each get treated separately?
So for Social Security, survivor benefits are exempt under the Vermont exemption already. So it's Social Security is technically OASDI, old age, disability, and survivors insurance. So the Vermont Social Security exemption did not make any sort of delineations between what type of Social Security you're receiving. It's just all one payment. So if you're receiving an old age retirement check plus a survivor check, Vermont counts that as your entire Social Security, and that's what gets exempted.
And okay, so it's only the first 10,000 gets exempted.
No, so the Vermont Social Security exemption is a full exemption if your AGI is under 45 single and 60,000 married. That's current law.
Yeah. But
the exemption under S53 is a $10,000 military retirement pay exemption. That does not include survivor benefits paid to military spouses or dependents. It's only for the military retirement pay paid to the retiree. The governor's proposal expands that by bringing in survivors as well.
And how much more does that cost?
So bringing in the survivors I don't have an estimate for under the $10,000 deduction. The full exemption is about $280,000. I would imagine, I mean, my first thought is that it would be pretty close to that full exemption because survivor benefits are not as high as military retiree benefits. So the average survivor benefit is about $10,000 or so. So it would likely be around $200-ish thousand is my guess.
That is decimal dust in this.
So when we do that,
I'll do that.
10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things about survivor benefit pay for military retirees, if I'm not incorrect, and I believe I'm correct, is that the survivor benefit is an annuity that is paid, but the retiree has to pay premiums for that survivor benefit out of retirement pay. In other words, it only begins to be charged after the person is retired, if I'm not mistaken. Again, Graham or somebody can look at that to make absolutely sure I'm correct, but I believe that I am.
I think that it's something like that. The cost of the retirement is shared by the government and the retiree.
Yeah,
so it's not, I don't know the full specific, but I think Senator Brock is correct that there is some sharing in a way that there is not for normal retirees. And I believe the survivor's annuity is, I think, half or just over half of the actual retiree's benefit. So it's not the full benefit.
Well, if we're trying to look for equity, if we don't tax survivor benefits for Social Security, why would we tax it for?
No, that's not, I don't think that's what Graham said.
Oh, okay.
Can you just clarify? Because I heard that for first time, but then for Social Security, my understanding of what you told us is we don't distinguish between the types of Social Security, whether it's disability, old age Social Security, or survivor Social Security. That's all the same for our purposes for the deduction. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So, yeah, I heard the opposite too, and then you said something different. So that's why I wanted to clarify. So we just treat it all the same under Social Security. So the parallel argument would be we should treat the military stuff all the same.
Are we going with one $10,000 deduction from your pension or your Social Security plus survivor benefits? Or are we going to do what the House did, which is Social Security plus pension, 10,000 each?
And it doesn't mention survivor at all.
And it doesn't, no, that one doesn't mention survivor.
The Social Security is not a $10,000. The current law Social Security is not a $10,000 deduction.
Right, it's up to
45,000 and
yeah, it's up to a certain.
Yeah, it's so you're
But
saying
it's roughly equivalent in the tax value. Remember, the 10,000 was $230. I think Social Security is $250.
okay, and so that under that would be you could get one or the other, but you couldn't get both.
Right. Or the House Senate, you could get both, starting at 65, or I assume if you were also on disability insurance. Yeah. Social Security disability. We've already blown most of the day. I'd like to resolve something. This is the last week, guys, and we will work into the evening, so.
So I just to be clear, I would not take it back.
Okay, so you're one deduction.
Yeah.
All right. And survivor benefits? Survivor benefits?
Yes.
Okay,
Me too.
you're a one. Senator McDonald,
Survivor benefits.
and you're a one. All right.
What do you mean and survivor benefits? Just to be clear.
All survivor benefits are
All
not
survivor,
taxable.
yeah, we do that with Social Security.
Wait, but Graham just said we treat the Social Security, they're all the same.
No, I understand he changed his mind, I still want to deduct for.
Oh, you
survivor.
want to, so do it for social security and for military?
No.
I'm confused.
It's survivor
I'm sorry.
I just want to do the house, no, I want to do just the $10,000 once,
Right,
plus no taxation on survivor's benefits, which JFO has costed out at $200,000.
That's the military. That's the military.
I didn't know we were talking about social
Yeah, but
security.
so that would mean that that's not how we do it for social security.
Right.
Okay.
but it's all the same
So
income.
you would take a survivor benefit even at age 65 when the survivor is also receiving social security.
Yes.
If somebody has, listen, they have the trifecta. They've got social security, they've got military, and military retirement, and military survivors. Okay. They would then, in terms of that $10,000 that we're talking about being deducted, that would only be allowed once for those things. Plus, they wouldn't have to report for taxation their survivor benefits.
Is that,
I think it's very small. This amount of survivor
We're not
benefits.
talking about a huge amount of money there.
Then go to conference.
yes,
Where hopefully we fix it,
It'll be
bring it back up
fun.
again.
okay, so I think where we're leaning is we don't tax your social security if you're under 50 sliding or 55 sliding and 65 sliding, but we have an income tax. We don't tax your social security. We won't tax the first $10,000 of your military pension, which is roughly equivalent in value. We've also got the roughly equivalent to the civil service. All right, and when you hit 65, you can choose. Again, you'll be under those income caps. So you can look and maybe you'll get a better benefit if you don't tax your social security at all, or if you tax, but there's no double dipping, one or the other, I think is what I'm hearing. We will not tax survivor benefits. And am I missing something? I don't think so. Is that what?
Senator Pearson has his hand.
Senator Pearson?
I like all that, and that is an outline I agree with. The question that Graham brought up is, what happens if it seems straightforward on this double dipping question once you hit a Social Security eligibility. But what about somebody that's collecting Social Security by virtue of being disabled? Do we mean and so they're 48 and they're disabled and so therefore unable to work? Are we also trying to say that they would today get a Social Security deduction? Or you know what I'm trying to say. So do we mean to allow them to double dip or not?
I don't know, Graham, if I start collecting disability, because I'm 35, that's my Social Security payment. When I hit 65, I don't get an additional payment, right?
I don't know the exact answer to that question.
Because I haven't paid in
I think
anything
the
in.
benefits are the same whether the retirement or disability. benefit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to work a certain amount, which I believe is the same amount as regular Social Security. And so I don't know if you switch over to old age or whether you stay on your disability, and I don't know if it's the exact same. Generally, the requirements to get disability are very similar to those for old age retirement.
But if you are collecting SSI, as it's called, for being disabled, we've forgiven that income if you hit the income subject to the income thresholds, even if you're not retired, right? Even if you're 45 or something.
That's
So
correct.
that's the question that I think is outstanding and just we need to be clear about.
Okay, so if you're 45 and you're getting disability, no, we're talking about survivor benefits. No, disability, military, no, you don't, you get social security disability
Yes.
plus a military pension. Right now,
I think we should just be consistent and it's, you get one or the other, no matter what age you are.
May I suggest, though, that we consult with the tax department, because I think it is very possible that spousal benefit is not taxable for federal tax purposes to begin with, because it's paid for by what essentially is like an annuity contribution. And I'm not sure we've got all
so
the tax
let's,
that we're dealing with right now.
I'd like to be able to
Talk about
have,
the military spousal benefit?
Yeah.
okay, so we will check with the tax department on that. Abby, can you check that for us?
I can actually answer that. I did research into that. It is
okay,
federally
good.
taxable currently.
I'm sorry?
It is taxable?
It is taxable currently.
Is-
That's why it's being proposed to be exempted. The military survivor benefit income.
All right,
I'm just reading here, survivor's pension is tax-free benefit payable by Department of Veterans Affairs to a low-income, unremarried, surviving spouse and unmarried dependent children of the deceased wartime veteran.
Is it federally taxable, Abby?
Yes.
It is.
all right.
I see another place. where it says-
So I'm getting a disability social security check. I'm 45. I'm also getting, because I got injured and weren't able to work when I got out of the military, but I also have my 20 years and I have my military pension. Right now, if you're under a certain income level, we aren't taxing, and if you can't work, you probably are. We aren't taxing your social security.
That's correct.
So it would be consistent if we didn't tax your, well, no, because it is social security disability. So why do we have to change any of that? Are we talking about the survival?
It's not that we have to change anything. It's that we've said you can have this partial tax exemption on your military pension, but then once you are collecting Social Security, you can't have both.
Choose.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we, and Senator Hardy, I think I agree, but Senator, the question is, do we also say you can't have both to somebody that is collecting Social Security because they're disabled?
I say, yes, you can't have both. Social Security makes no differentiation between a disability payment and a retirement payment.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Same with survivor benefits. Once you hit 65, I mean, you
The
know,
weather benefits are less smaller.
yeah,
first of all.
okay.
As far as,
So it's, everybody gets treated the same, but we will exempt all. Because there's some that you remarry, your kids marry, the survivor benefit goes away, whether we like how the military does that.
Return 18 or 21.
Yeah. So do we just not tax survivor benefits, which is $200 and some thousand?
We're just
And
talking about
then-
military benefit, right? We're not talking about Social Security. This is
No,
talking about
military
Social Security.
survivor benefits.
And do those go away at some point? When do they go away?
I don't know anything about military.
Yeah.
It was something, somebody read through, it's surviving spouse, minor children, they go, I don't know who said it, until the children marry or hit age 21, there were some limitations on that. And I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard it at this table today. But I don't think they go on forever. I don't think you're 65 and collecting a benefit because your father was disabled. Because you get a Social Security payment if your father is disabled and you're a minor child. I don't think that goes on till you're 65 or 70. It's only until you're not a minor child anymore.
Yeah, but who knows if the military is exactly the same.
Okay.
I
So,
think we should be silent on that since we don't know the details and just do the
okay,
one, you can do one or the other, period.
I think we can do that. The question, I think, though I'm hearing that most of us would just like to not tax survivor benefits.
The military.
Military survivor. It's very little, it's an annuity. It's not gonna cost us very much. And it's something we're giving to the military. Since we're not giving them the double dipping.
Sure.
Okay. Abby, can you draft all that?
These maps are really.
I'm losing all my staff at 4:00 and we're not gonna get to do waiting.
Can
All
I
right.
try to, can I ask a few follow-up questions to make sure that I'm
Are
drafting?
you mean you don't completely understand what you said?
I understand that you want to give the option, or sorry, first you want to exempt $10,000 of military retirement pay until the individual becomes eligible for the Social Security exemption, and then it's an option. That's the
Right.
first point. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Meaning they
And-
get one or the other.
Right.
Once they become eligible for Social Security,
Yeah.
then they make the choice, one or the other. They can't take both, but it is a choice. It's not there isn't a requirement to take the Social Security exclusion. Okay. Second, I understand that you want to exempt all military survivor benefits. Would you like to have that same until eligible for Social Security exemption or leave it silent? Is that what you were just deciding?
I thought we were leaving it silent. I'm going to the McDonald thumbs up or thumbs down. We're going to accept all
What was,
thumbs up. All right, I've got 3. You're okay, Chris? All right, for Chris. All right, yes.
Okay.
It's a very sophisticated decision system here.
Yeah.
And then
It's sausage making at its finest, have you?
In person for the first time. It's amazing.
Okay, yes.
Get used to.
did you wish to address the civil service retirement system, or are you
Yes.
leaving that for S227?
No, we'll stick that in here too. This is we're gonna give everybody something and make it go away, Bill.
Okay, I will circulate a draft once I have that edited.
Okay, and
Um,
if anybody comes up with some numbers that skew these things or laws or, anything that would really skew the basis we're working on, let us know. But I think we're pretty solid ground.
So
Okay.
at the risk of being shot and George, the civil service retirees get survivor benefits.
Don't ask. Okay,
Draft Easter's stuff was the same to you.
yes, unless you can come up with an amendment.
$10,000 worth of retirement.
If they're making under 70,000.
With you, Mark. I think it's ridiculous.
Here,
I said I'm with you. I think it's ridiculous, but whatever, we're doing it.
May I ask one more clarifying question?
Yes.
Realizing, the way that the House drafted the $10,000 military retirement exclusion, the way it was drafted in that bill, it was not subject to any AGI thresholds. So it was a deduction from taxable income. I assume that's the same approach that you wish to take.
No, wasn't there? Are we
Social
doing-
Security has a cap.
Social
If-
Security does, but the
Yeah.
military retirement proposal that the House passed over was just a pure exclusion of the first 10,000 from taxable income.
Right, because most of the pensions would put them up over the 45,000. I mean, they're much more generous pensions than Social Security. So if you do it based on income, many of them would qualify.
except that they can start getting it when they're working, when they're 40.
Right, and then they'll have another job, and then they'll be up above that income threshold.
Which is why they,
Exactly, which is why they don't need it, because we have a progressive taxation system.
I like the caps. I just don't want to exempt somebody that's become a consultant, Raytheon.
Yep.
I mean, because, I'm sorry, but when these people retire, they're not gonna have a Choices for Care program if we keep cutting revenues.
Yep. So we could just not do anything. That's always an option too. We can just.
That
take it
is
all
allowed.
out.
Or we could deduct that amount.
Should we put that back on the table?
No.
Madam Chair?
No. We're making a decision.
no, but, so I thought Abby's last question was about, is it capped or not?
Is it, there's an income threshold.
Yeah.
It's if your income is under, and it's up to, there's a ramping, but it's up to 70,000.
Right, like the 45-60 rule.
Yeah,
And from the equality point of view, like, I don't know why I would want a different deal for, especially when I keep going back over and over again, to people who aren't gonna have any benefit package like that, to assist them.
Madam Chair, that's what you were assuming through all your questions.
I was, yes, I kept saying that because I wanted to make sure. We just don't have the income base in the state. If we get an income base, we can do more. But all these retirees, we're gonna have to provide home health services for. And, because I don't think the VA does home health.
But just bear in mind, military retirees, you don't have any healthcare costs. They're all covered under TRICARE.
VA,
No, well, again, that's a federal program. It's not a
Yes.
state program,
No,
so it's not
it's
state
not.
funds, but generally, they are not necessarily the VA customer because they got a TRICARE. They've got a full medical program that they get when they retire.
including home visitation, home.
I can't tell you everything that's in the program, but it's the same healthcare program. It's like, the equivalent of the healthcare program we have through private insurance. It's just through a military supply carrier.
Maybe we should extend that to everyone.
If we're not at a half an hour.
I'm trying to get the income cap for Abby.
Yes.
All right, we're leaving the income cap in. Okay, can you draft that? And we will have one mega bill here. And I don't know how they came together. I'm not gonna put this on Senator Brock's bill because I don't think that would be fair. So we'll keep it on the feminine hygiene products bill. And we will have one massive committee of conference. Okay. So we'll get that and we will put that on for a vote, probably Thursday. All right,
We want to do people waiting.
we
We don't have any.
we
staff
don't
report.
have any staff waiting. No, we haven't voted anything out. Well, just take up residence in here on Thursday and Friday. All right, but we can go through the waiting bill, which we are pretty much decided on. I think I got it straight for the caucus today, that we were going to pretty much follow the recommendations of the task force which is basically all waiting, we're keeping the waiting numbers. I think I can explain to Barry and U32 the differences. We are going to do with Ed's recommendation for the ELL students, a weight plus an individual payment per student. And what else did I miss in there?
Well, I can take you through the draft, even though Jim's not here. There are changes from the last time, some of the ones that we discussed, and then a few other things that have come up. I met with the Secretary of Education last week, and they made a few suggestions. They're pretty minor, but I'm happy to walk you through
This is
all of them.
going down as, all right. Draft 3, draft 4.
Copies here.
There's,
Copy.
it's 4.3, I
Yeah,
think.
that is
You
draft
want
4. Anybody?
You.
pass those down.
Okay. Now, did he happen to highlight the changes?
I think that they're highlighted from, yes, the first change is not until page 6. So,
What is? Go away. Where am I? Let's copy it again.
Is it fiscal now?
I know, it's not quite 40 pages yet,
Yeah.
but it's almost there.
Let's get in there. All right, first change is on 6.
So, do you want me to walk you through the whole bill again, or just the changes? Because
Let's just go through the
changes,
changes.
okay, so starting on page 6. This is, if you recall, we talked about the changes for moving from, right now we do eligibility for nutrition benefits through the SNAP program. We're gonna have a 1 year where we're doing the free and reduced lunch, and then we're gonna move to the universal income form. So section 4 makes the change moving from the SNAP benefits to the free and reduced lunch for the first year. And then section 4A moves from the free and reduced lunch to the income, the universal income declaration form. So that's why it's sort of the same section drafted twice.
Yeah, these all seem to be
Yeah, so,
more drafting or stylistic.
right, so this was just to clarify, because you'll recall it wasn't quite clear when we would be making that shift.
Okay, and this would also include all students who are not English language.
So current law, the reason why that's drafted that way, section 4, current law, students who are ELL students are actually included as students who live in poverty. There's, basically our current law makes that assumption and includes them. So this would keep that the way it is for the first year before the new weights go into effect. So essentially, for the, and then it would move to, if you look at 4A, that language is struck. And it goes to the universal income form, because that's when the new poverty weight and the
Child of a Saudi prince, they're not getting free and reduced lunch the second year. Okay.
And it's just,
Do we have any of those, but just in case?
Just one question that I've had, we're already working a bit about the form is, what happens when people don't fill it out? 1, or 2, what happens when people fill it out with inaccurate information? And is there any thought about what the rate of non-compliance will be, which I suspect will be quite high at this initial?
so I think that's true for the current methods as well. So I
Yeah.
don't think that there's
Yeah.
gonna be too much of a change in terms, I can't decide whether foggy glasses are better or not. I don't think there's gonna be too much of a change in terms of non-compliance or inaccurate information from what we currently have. But the Agency of Education is tasked in the bill of creating the new form and has a little working group that would do so. So that working group could work to address that and how school districts, the form is supposed to be fully accessible. It would be, everybody would be required to do it. I mean, I can tell you just my own personal example. I never fill out the free and reduced lunch form because I know my family wouldn't qualify. But if my school district told me you should fill this out, I would fill it out. And I think, now I'm not the average, but I think that there would be, school districts would be really working to get it filled out, because it would mean additional taxing
I'm
capacity
thinking in
for them.
particular though of taxpayers like you, whose families wouldn't qualify, how much of a privacy objection there's going to be to collect information that they would argue that you don't need.
Well, I think that this form is allowed by the federal government, and it is based on the brackets. It's not based on specific income. So I wouldn't have to say exactly how much my family makes, but just sort of like check in the bracket. And it would be covered by all of the same kind of confidentiality requirements that
I'm just
all-
anticipating that, you know, there are going to be privacy objections, that if the purpose of this is to, you know, deal with free and reduced lunch, that, you know, and clearly I don't want free and reduced, my kids don't want free and reduced lunch. Why are you making me fill this form out is going to be an argument that you will hear. And second, there will be concerns about confidentiality.
Yeah, and I think that later on in the bill, we also make recommendation that we have that new ed fund thing come back with recommendations. So I think if there are issues, there are a couple mechanisms in the bill that would allow them to be addressed, or at least highlighted.
I'm just anticipating objections.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I'm not sure that it's going to be any worse than it is now. It's just going to be different.
I mean, this is the thing, the teacher is going to safety pin to the kid's jacket to make sure that you've had that. Why is that pinned to your jacket? Because my teacher doesn't think I'll give it to you.
The truant officer will come to get the form if you don't bring it in.
That's right, the truant officer, yes. Actually, they have quite an active program in Winooski where if you don't come to school, they do come preaching.
So, oh, sorry. Section 5 is the section about the universal income declaration form. That would start in the 23-24 school year. And it would be set at 185% of poverty, which is currently what we use for both free and reduced lunch and SNAP. So it's not a change in the poverty level, it's just a change in how we collect the information. And then there's created on or before October 1st of this year, the Agency of Education has that working group, and it would be a statewide to determine whether a pupil is from an economically deprived background. So those are the first changes, and those were the ones that we talked about part of what we talked about last committee member
Okay, so this is really, it's more of a technical, it's not substantive.
It's not, it's just clarifying it, because I think when we read it last time, you all had some questions about it, and it was good because I'd read it so many times, I understood it, but you didn't, and that showed me that we needed to clarify it. So hopefully this clarifies it. Page 10 is the next change. And this is also a clarifying change to align the small school enrollment with the population density enrollment. Just clarifying that we have that the agency would have to provide both, because there's a threshold. Not all small schools get the small school rate. It's only small schools in low population density areas.
Okay.
So that would be aligning that. And then on page 11, it's the same kind of aligning with those two measures. And then the next change is page 17. There's just an insertion of a word. And this is in the ELL section of the things that the agency is required to do. The secretary asked if we could insert professional development resources. So it was clear that the agency wouldn't be required to actually do the professional development. School districts could do the professional development.
Just write a check.
But the agency could provide resources, guidance, curriculum, et cetera. But the local school districts or some other organization could do the actual professional development for teachers and support personnel. So that was minor but important to AOE.
Getting motion set.
Yeah, so
We have struck.
the
Oh, we did
striking,
that anyway, that's
that was
all.
before, that was the small schools grants, the
Yeah.
current small schools grants, getting rid of them, which pretty much everybody loves.
Okay.
Okay, so page 26. This came up the task force talked about this briefly, and it came up with a superintendent's meeting that I was at. We currently require school districts to put on their budget ballots language about the increase or decrease on a per equalized pupil basis for their budget. And voters see it. If you all just voted on your school budget, you probably saw it on your ballot.
No, nobody looks at it. I didn't look at it.
Well,
But it's one of the methods we have tried, putting things on the ballot to make people think about whether or not they're going to vote for Nicole.
Right. So the problem is during the transition, because we're changing the pupil weights, equalized pupils are going to change pretty drastically in some districts, and they're going to change in all districts. So through no change at all of the school budget, the per pupil spending on an equalized pupil basis will change in a school district.
Yeah.
And so it will be super confusing to voters because things are going to be going up and down.
I
And in
had
some
5,000 this year and I've got 6,000 students and I don't know where anybody moved into town.
Right, so it's gonna be super confusing. So we had talked about this briefly. So this just suspends that during the transition, just like we suspend other things that are gonna kind of be out of whack during the transition. And later on in the bill, there's a requirement that this Education Fund Advisory Committee make a recommendation for when to bring that back in and what it would say, or if to bring that back in, or if there's some other way to do it. So when I get to that, I'll explain that too. So then the next change is on page 28. It's one of those small word changes that makes a big difference. This is the audit requirements. And there was a long list of things to include in the audit. So measurements, the quality standards, test scores, the TOEFL scores, the youth risk behavior surveys, graduation rates, etc. The secretary asked that he thought that was a really, really long list and might be very, very difficult to get all of those things into an audit. We already have the requirement that AOE, the Education Fund Advisory Committee, and the auditor would determine what the sort of standards are for the audit and the scope of the audit. So we changed this from a shall include to a may include, so that not all of those measures would have to be in there. So that's that. You know, I think ideally like them all in there, but he was very concerned that that would be difficult. So that was their request. And then on page 29, this is the language about the auditor hosting a web page. This is what Senator Brock requested to make sure there's transparency. So it would have this act, whatever it is that passes, the statement of work that is agreed upon, any reports to the General Assembly about its work, and then all of the metrics that are used, what's the list that they end up deciding to use. That was that. On page 31, this is changes to the powers and duties of the Education Fund Advisory Committee.
Okay, this we did go over last time.
Yeah, so here, there are a couple things that, so changes, we added a section, actually, this is not one that we went over. There are some things we went over and some things we didn't. So the powers and duties, updating the weighting factors, changes or addition to elimination of the categorical aid, changes to income levels for the property tax credit under that. So that was the thing that you and Senator McDonald were talking about, like the income threshold for property tax
Why
credit.
she keeps up the way it is.
Right.
I gotta go fill my gas tank tonight.
So we took out the stuff that was this, as you said, the sort of purely mathematical.
Yeah.
The means to adjust the revenue sources for education fund, including whether to transition to an education income tax. So that was a way to put that in there. And there's a little bit more of that later. And the means for improving equity, transparency, and efficiency, whether and when to reinstate the excess spending threshold, and whether and when to reinstate that language that we just talked about on the school
Okay.
budget. So that, and then further down in paragraph 3, in the initial report, since we've talked about the income tax thing and come to no conclusions and we're running out of time, Senator Pearson and I talked about putting it in here so that this tax fund could make recommendations on some of the things that we were sort of getting stuck on. How do you deal with the renter's credit? How do you administer such a new thing, and ways to transition? And this would be done in conjunction with this committee, the JFO, and the Department of Taxes. And so just making recommendations on sort of how could it maybe work. But no recommendations on definitely doing it, but just how it might
Well,
work.
that just saves me my second discussion.
There you go, Madam Chair. Trying to help out to move things along. Down below, on bottom of page 39, it just moved. Originally, it had 8-minute meetings per year for this new committee, and that seems like excessive, so I changed it to 4. It also makes it cheaper. So that makes the change on top of page 33, changes the appropriation from 5,000 to 2,500. And the joint fiscal and AOE have to enter into an MOU. And this just adds language about updating the weights and recalibration and recalculation. The same language that is above for that committee. On page 34, the Agency of Education staffing request or staffing 6 positions. The secretary wanted them a little bit rearranged. So there would be 1 position for ELL because he said there's already a position. And so he thought 2 for ELL would be sufficient. Then 2 that would work on the universal income declaration form and provide guidance to school districts on its use. And then the 3 positions for finance and data. So it's still 6 positions. He did adamantly support the 6 positions. He thought that they were necessary to be able to do all the work that's required. And then I think the final change is just in the effective dates, adding the effective dates for various things that were just added and renumbering. So those are the changes since the last time we saw it.
Question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
When you're in page 31, there are references to the new educational property tax system. And is that referring to the weighting system that we're talking about here?
Which
On
one?
page 30.
Make recommendations on the implementation of an education income tax system to replace the homestead education property tax system. So this would be recommending how or whether to.
It would first be whether, right? Make recommendations on implementation. I
Is this
suppose
like
one of
possible implementation?
Yeah,
or-
I mean, that was the intent, was it would be possible implementation.
Okay, so it's,
And listing some of the things that were sort of sticking points, like, well, how do we deal with renters? How do we implement it? That kind of thing.
so it's not referring to something that was previously in the bill, which is a new system.
Right.
Other than the weighting, which is being folded into the current.
Exactly. So this would be, we have that other bill that we don't have time to get to. This would sort of plant the seeds for trying to answer some of the questions to decide whether or not we want
No
to
one
in the
would look at
future.
that and say, wait a minute, where's the new system in here?
Correct, right. And if there's some tweaking you want to do to it, that's totally
Okay.
fine. That the intent was mostly just to get some more information and see if it's even feasible. And if not, then we can ignore the information.
that works.
Yeah, and then maybe that will save.
Committee, does this work? We've got the joint, also got handed out.
Yeah, so Julia did a.
Then Julia is here, or at least I say her name. There's Julia. Okay, so Julia, can you just run it through this? since this is our area of responsibility. Okay,
Sure, Julia Richter, Joint Fiscal Office. So on the committee page, there should be the fiscal note posted under my name. And this is a fiscal note that is corresponding to the draft of the bill that Senator Hardy just walked the committee through. Do you want me to pull it up on my screen, or do you want me to just walk through the document?
I think we've all got a paper copy, or maybe Senator Pearson, if it's posted, you've got it.
Yeah, I've got it on my computer, so no need to do it for me.
So just talk to us. This is the brave new world.
Okay, well,
Someday you'll actually get to sit in here.
I look forward to it. I'm over in the Pink Lady every day, so feel free if you'd like to come over and meet me in person. But I'll start out with the fiscal note. So overall, in fiscal year 23, JFO estimates this bill would result in a $602,500 fiscal impact to the general fund, and would have an unclear fiscal impact to the education fund in future years. So starting out with the general fund fiscal impact, this stems from the two appropriations that are spelled out in the bill. So the $2,500, which is for the per diem and reimbursement of expenses for the members of the Education Fund Advisory Committee, and then the $600,000 for the full-time positions for AOE. So I guess before I move into the potential fiscal impacts to the education fund, I will pause there and see if there's any questions about those numbers.
I'm not seeing any. I think those are pretty straightforward.
Yep. Okay, then moving on, I guess there's sort of two sort of buckets to talk about. So the first would be regarding the ELL categorical grants. So if we assume that the ELL categorical grants were to result in full increased spending, in FY24, we estimate this would result in approximately $1.75 million impact to the education fund. And this stems from the categorical aid of $25,000 provided to districts with 1 to 5 ELL students and $50,000 to districts with 6 to 25 ELL students. So as I know the committee is well aware, absent any other changes in policy, an increase in spending would result in the base homestead yields and or the base non-homestead tax rate would need to be adjusted to account for any increase in spending. But that is an assumption. So that's, I do want to flag that. Before moving on to the other potential fiscal issues, are there any questions about that portion?
I am not seeing any. Not a roll.
Okay, then moving on, I'm on page 2 now. In this third section, the other potential fiscal issues. And so with the adjustment of the pupil weights, tax capacity will be shifted for most school districts and towns. So that means that assuming education spending remains constant, some towns' tax rates would increase while other towns' tax rates would decrease. And so, in other words, assuming this education spending remains constant, towns that would have fewer equalized pupils with the new weights than they had with the prior weights would have higher tax rates, while towns that would have more equalized pupils with the new weights than they had with the prior rates would have lower tax rates. So this is likely to have an effect on the education fund, including the property and income yields, the base non-homestead tax rate, but this effect is unclear as education spending is determined at the local level, which leads me into the second related major bullet point here, that total education spending is determined by local votes and may increase. Districts with increased tax capacity, which is what I just spoke about, may increase education spending, while districts with decreased equalized pupils and thus decreased tax capacity may not choose to decrease spending significantly. But I do, of course, want to reiterate that while the changes in weights and changes in ELL funding may change local decisions and local funding choices, the actual change in total education spending is determined at the local level, which is why it's unclear what effect this would have on the education fund. So I guess from my end, in terms of going through the fiscal note, that's what I've prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions, committee? I am not seeing it. Okay, thank you. A lot of unknowns in this one that's
Unclear.
unclear. We knew that going in.
I think we should have a pool in which we select the percentage of increase in overall education spending we expect to result from passage of this bill
If
over
the-
the rate of inflation.
I think, yeah, we've had so much pressure on schools to keep their spending down that if they can lose taxing capacity without going up, I'm gonna be surprised. Some schools will do well, but some of the others, this is gonna be a hard one. Okay. Any further questions or discussion?
Well, it's sort of, every year when we've gone home for town meeting, we've known what the yield was gonna be or the tax rate was gonna be. Do we know that yet?
Not unless it's in one of the bills the House sent over. We never, it's usually in miscellaneous tax. So it is never set in stone until the and that's usually one of the last. The House, if it's way off from the December, and I think this year.
Rephrase my question, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this year the House did put a bill out to indicate that no, that was last year, the December 1st letter, because it was based on all of our $150 million deficit in the ed fund. They set one out early on to message. And I think we do that letter, and that's what towns are basing it on.
So we usually put out a number that we believe that would, a number that it would not be higher than. To the end of the session, sometimes it came out a little bit lower. But we've always been able to take a chart to, if you vote this, you vote that, this is what you can depend on, and it may be better than that. But there were no charts this year, no.
Well, okay. Julia, can you help us?
Sure. So I think that Senator McDonald, you're referencing charts that were put out in previous years. My understanding is that those were not put out this year because there is the large surplus on the bottom line of the education fund. So it's unclear what will happen with the yields and with the tax rates because there is this surplus. I will say that Ways and Means has been taking testimony. They started pre-town meeting. They took more testimony today about how school budgets have come in accordance with what was originally anticipated. They're a bit higher than was forecasted in the December 1 letter, but we're still working to make sense of those numbers. and Ways and Means is discussing it. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it leads me to the next question, which was, as we adjourned for town meeting, you asked me to put in a request to JFO to bring us back an estimate on how many Vermonters paid their school taxes based on their income as a percentage of the population, and, which has occasionally been 80% and then drifted downward, back up and downwards. To find out what it was today, have we? I think this is 2 weeks later. Do we have a number?
Yeah, I actually did share that number with Senator Cummings, and I did send it to you. I don't know if it was missing your inbox.
Oh, I'm sure it's lost somewhere in my email. So.
No, it's okay. I'm happy to forward it to you again. I did respond that day.
Just tell him now, we're fine.
Okay, so in fiscal year 2023, we estimate that approximately 67% of Vermont households will receive a property tax credit.
67% in fiscal
year 23, so the year that we're talking about moving into.
And what is it this year?
This year, I don't have that number in front of me. I can send that to you later.
Okay.
But it is definitely slipping down.
Yeah, it's going down.
So,
Yeah.
So we think that it's higher than 67%, but we'll find out later.
Yeah, because what it was before was more around 70%. So I think it's kind of declining.
That's another adjustment that.
I know it's around 70%. The exact percentage, I don't have, but I will forward that to the committee.
72 sticks in my mind for some reason. It's in that ballpark, but it is significantly lower than the 80 we originally aimed for.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what one of the things we recommend. We asked them to recommend the income level.
For what year?
So that the education fund advisory committee thing, that was one of the things that's added onto their duties, is to recommend changes to the income level.
But they're not going to meet and make a recommendation in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
No. So we could change it now, but
So if there's going to be a recommendation to deal with that, it's got to be done. So
do you have a recommendation?
80%.
Okay, but you just don't recommend it. You're gonna do numbers.
You got to set the income level.
And set levels.
Yes.
Okay, I would suggest that might be something we put on the miscellaneous tax bill, because this bill is coming out of here.
While you're getting that other number for this year, could you share with us what, how we would have to appropriate money to restore 80% of Vermont's working families to pay their school taxes based on their houses and acres, based on income?
I think what he's asking is if joint fiscal, and I think this will be cooperative, can give us an income level. Right now it's at 90 or is it up to 100, and it ramps down.
There's two different, it's at 90,000, and then as it moves up, then the level of homestead value decreases.
Which decreases, yes.
The slope. What would the number, the 90,000, have to be for 80% of Vermont families who live in homes to pay their school taxes based on their incomes?
Okay, sure, we can look into that and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Committee. We've got a heavy agenda tomorrow. Did everybody get the timeline? Dylan's waiting, okay. He is going to be in. I've got waiting and feminine hygiene products on for vote on Thursday. If I could get them out sooner, I'd like to, because they're going to approach.
Great.
And I'd
Do we
like
still have
to.
questions on the waiting? Can we
I
do
don't
it
think
today?
so. And if, my next thing was, and what are we going to do about the income base? But you've put that in there. And if that works for you and Senator Pearson, because I've been trying to get some stuff, but joint fiscal is in no position right now to free up the
Right.
people to do it. So,
mean-
if we can do the weighting with this in it, and we've still got 212, and there's always miscellaneous tax, but I think this outside committee, and we may actually have to do some money for a consultant depending on what they find out.
My attitude is this gives the House something to look at if they want to, and I would hope it doesn't end our work on it, but it's
No.
a little marker.
It won't, it's just looking for breathing space.
Yeah, that was the intent, trying to give you some breathing space.
I appreciate that, all of us. I would prefer not to go to 10 o'clock. I don't know what ACE 88 is, but that's that regulating small cannabis cultivation farming. I would assume we will vote that out tomorrow. That was saying, yeah, we know it can't be agriculture, but if you do 1,000 by 1,000 lot or foot growth, it doesn't detract from your current use because it's not agriculture by federal standards, and it carried over the agricultural tax exemption for if you're buying twine to tie up your cannabis plants, they're buying a tractor.
What time are we starting tomorrow? Are we actually starting at 1:30?
Yeah,
Okay.
I tried moving it back on Fridays and no one shows up till 1:30 anyway, so I gave up. Energy savings accounts, are we going to extend those, that pilot program that just didn't get off the ground? And then yeah, they slowed renewable power. Then we are going to go up or down on Rygate. Really, all right, and I'm not, Rachel Smolter called and asked to testify on biochar. And the timeline is there. I thought we were actually might get someone from the board or the PUC. And then, yes, 437, the House would like out. We're gonna go back over it. That's that little something for everybody bill. I did get an email from Peter Tucker from the Realtors who said they'd like to testify, and I said, fine. But no one else has asked. And then the utility construction work site. I don't know if we're ready to vote that or not, but FX Flint has sent me, I assume maybe some of you, emails. Apparently EC Fiber is not involved in the lawsuit. They've been dropped so he wants to come in and explain to us what actually happened who is in the insurance process, because we're trying to make sure, and I'm not sure that there's a problem. We're trying to solve a problem that may not exist, unless we want to find a way that no plaintiff has to go to court. And when you're dealing with insurance companies, I don't know that, but we will find out what the the actual details of the present.
He's told us years ago, they don't put fiber on poles. That's not what DC Fiber does.
Yes, I know that. We're going to hear who had insurance, when they had insurance, before we start telling people they have to have insurance. It sounds like they may already have to have insurance. And we may be trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I think it sounds like it's not that the Hoyts are not going to have their losses covered. It's just that it takes a while, which for them is very difficult.
Which Appropriations Committee told us that no one had made a request to tie it to Hoyt Silver.
Yeah.
On a supplemental bill.
I
It would
told
be
you to
open
set up a
for-
GoFundMe page. I
They
think
did a
that-
GoFundMe page and
Good.
it's paid a substantial portion,
Good,
but it hasn't paid it all.
paid it all.
It's a pity that you have to do a GoFundMe page in order to get justice.
It is. It is. Senator Pearson.
Madam Chair, I do you need us anymore? I have a redistricting issue that I would get to if you're through with us or not. So just checking.
Do we want to?
I usually give bills an hour or a day to lay over in case somebody says, what do you mean you're voting it? So I've got everything tomorrow. I'd like to vote out as much as we can tomorrow. The other one is the timeshare one. I think we're gonna vote out. We'll hear from Rebecca Samaroff from the tax department, and I'm hoping that one's ready to go too. I'm
Okay.
trying to avoid 10 o'clock on Friday night. So are you leaving us or did you?
Well,
have
that's up to you, Madam Chair. If you're done with me, I would leave, but
I can be very done. I think
We are so done with
we are
you.
so done.
all right.
Okay. I think we are done.
You wanna end live stream?
We can end live stream. And right now,